Welcome to Zero's Views and Reviews. This channel is going to be a little bit about hardware, software, pop culture, and generally just a step away, a little bit more of a fun step, but hopefully a more helpful step away from some of the things that we do on the main channels. One of the things I perhaps didn't include in the title is the fact that I want to cover some technical stuff on here, especially for people who have a very basic level of understanding. So the first few videos I intend to release on here are actually a guide to just having a smoother PC experience, and it's aimed at a very basic level of people. So A, easy to understand, but B, I'll be making different videos that will be aimed at different tech levels, if you like. But for a basic computing experience, I'd say that that's where I want to start. So I'm going to try and start with the top 10 things to give you a smoother computing experience. So today we'll be covering number 1, defragmentation. Now, I find that the whole defragmentation subject to be one where I scratch my head in some of the things I see and how people treat it. So everybody knows they need to defrag their computer these days, pretty much. How many people actually do and how many people do it at the right times is arguable, and what people know about it is arguable as well. So to try and cover these points very quickly, everybody needs to defrag their hard drives, especially if you have a HDD, a normal hard drive, as opposed to the SSD. An SSD has no moving parts, whereas the older type hard drives that many of us use have spinning parts. Well, those have multiple disks in there, not just one. You'd think it was just one disk drive, but in there's actually loads and loads of disks, loads of surface, loads of cylinders, and they're actually made of the same stuff that cassette tapes used to be made of. So they spin round, and as the computer is doing many things at once, it writes and reads to different places, and over a very short period of time, if you use your computer a lot, it's writing to wherever it can to make the experience as quick as possible. However, over time, when it has to go back and find those files, it may have to search across multiple disks to find a very short file that could be just on one little disk in a little space. It'd be very easy to read. This is what happens over time. So defragmentation process, what it does is it takes those files, puts them back together, and also puts them in sensible places so that they can be read all in one big straight line, as opposed to from all different places all over the place. And I think that makes a kind of sense. So when you defrag, this is what you're doing. So I would recommend for anybody who's using overlight usage to do at least once a month. Anybody who's less than light usage, perhaps you can get away with less than that. But the very basic things to understand about defragmentation, if you want a smooth experience, is if you do it once a month, and here's things to remember. One of the biggest mistakes that I see people making is they start a defrag and it takes a very long time. And this is usually because they don't defrag it for ages and ages and ages, and yet they've done a lot on it. Well, what happens is a lot of the time when they leave it to that stage, it takes a very long time to defrag. You know, bear in mind it's got to take files, rewrite them, and it's got to do all these special tricks. So as a result, it can take a very long time. I mean, I've known it take 4 or 5 days. What a lot of people would do when this happens is after about 12 hours, they will stop the defrag. And then at some point again, they'll start it again, and then they'll stop it again, and then they'll start it again. And what this does is it actually makes the problem 10 times worse. And in the end, the computer will virtually try and cook itself trying to do these defrags. So if you're doing a defrag and you know you haven't done one for a while and your computer is taking ages and ages, don't turn it off. Leave it for if it needs to go for 4 days, it's probably your fault. So let it go for 4 days. Let it do its job. By stopping it, all you're doing is making it even harder the next time you try. And then once you've left it for those days and it finally completes, then that once a month defrag will stop it from ever getting like that again, and it shouldn't ever take that long again. Um, the other thing that people don't realize is that to be able to take these files and, as I said, put them in sensible order, it's a bit like having a filing cabinet and just through the necessity of speed, just throwing files in the cabinet all over the place. But then when you go to get the files out of the cabinet, you've got to go to various different cabinets. Perhaps you've got to go upstairs just to get one file that goes with the rest of the ones downstairs. That's a bit what it's like. So when the computer's in this position, the one thing you don't want to be doing is using it when you're doing a defragmentation, and you don't want to have your virus killer on. And if you're afraid of the internet and you think something bad's going to happen, then just disconnect it from the internet. But believe me, you don't want the virus killer on, and you don't want to be running programs, and you need to shut down every single program that you can. The reason being is that any program running will be running obviously from that disk drive, and it will lock any file that's in use. And that can be a lot of files. If you're playing a game and you've got your virus killer on, that's a lot of file, and it means it can't defrag properly, and it will just need to be done again. It will lock all these files down. So it's a dedicated job. So one, close as many programs as you can, get rid of your virus killer, and just leave it alone. I know it's inconvenient, and a lot of defrags will be set to a schedule, and often it will be 1 o'clock in the morning, and it will set it to do it once a week, once a month. The only thing about that is most of us tend to forget when that schedule is, and then we'll be using the computer one night and we won't realize that it started a defrag. One, we've just locked all the files so we can't do it properly, but two, it gives you a massive performance hit because it's using all your hard drives and trying to defrag them, and you're trying to use your computer not understanding why it suddenly slowed down. Often this is the reason, because it's gone into scheduled task. So if you know how, and I can always show you in an intermediate video, turn off that schedule and just write it on your calendar once a month, defrag. As I said, once you've done that, let it do its thing. SSD drives, the one without moving parts that are a lot faster, they must not be defragged by a regular defrag program, because they work in a very different way. And what it actually does when you try and defrag one of those is it actually can destroy the drive, because it's doing lots and lots of reading and writing on there that really these drives weren't designed for. However, fortunately, most things these days will recognize an SSD straight away, and they will what's called optimize them rather than defrag them. Optimizing is moving huge chunks of files around to make them contiguous. They all read in one big straight line. So usually they will pick up on it, but if just be aware of this. SSD drives have a question mark over them as to how long they will last, and whether they're any good to use backups on, which we'll come to in another part of this series. I just wanted to start with a defragging first, and that's pretty much it. Just don't quit a defrag unless you've got serious reason to, and defragging for 24 hours and not finishing is not a reason to stop it. It probably means that you haven't defragged it for a very long time, but you've done a lot of maybe downloading and things like that. These are all the things that cause defragmentation, or moving of files, anything. So main things to remember. And if you know how to go in a safe mode and do a defrag there, if you're again, I can show you these things another time, but if you're capable already, that is the best way of doing a defrag, because it literally is the least running possible to be able to do it. So so tip one is just understand what defrag is, and understand the things that you shouldn't do. One of the most basic ones is don't use your computer, don't have programs running. Your computer is not fit for use while it's defragging, and just let it do its job and don't stop it. That's tip one of defragging. If there's anything I've forgotten, please feel free to enlighten myself and other people in the comments below. Everything I'm doing is off the top of my head, so there may be things I forget.